today, we're taking a look at 2 diagrams that I created solely using Adobe Illustrator. Now, these diagrams are not only going to be really easy and simple to make, but they're very versatile in that you can use it for many different things like design, programming, concept ideas, timelines, and many more. Now, one of the great reasons for putting a diagram like this together is that it allows you to take something that would normally be done verbally or in a way that isn't all that captivating visually, to do so and take it and make this into a really captivating idea that can not only stand alone, but it can be something that you don't even need to be there to express that idea. So with that said, let's take a look at how to create some of those diagrams and what you can do to get started on them. What's going on, everybody? My name is Carter, and here we talk and teach about all things landscape architecture and urban design. So if that's of interest, be sure to check out my channel for tons of new content and content that exists on the subject. But that said, the things you're going to need to create a diagram like this are Illustrator and some vector images. Now, for those of you who don't know what a vector is or what they are, they're commonly referred to as an SVG file. Now, an SVG file just means that it is an image that is a scalable vector graphic. Now, why am I bringing up these vector images? Well, that's what Illustrator likes to work in the most, and what you'll find when you're working through it, that they're all SVG files. This is one of the most fundamental differences between Illustrator and, say, Adobe Photoshop. And that's because Illustrator likes to use graphic organizations like SVGs, whereas in Photoshop, you're using PNGs and JPEGs. So if you were to pull up the two side by side and draw a line or import an image, as you zoom in, you'll notice that on Photoshop, the image will start to get pixelated because Photoshop works primarily in pixels, whereas if you were in Illustrator, as you zoom in, you can see that regardless of what you do, those images will always be nice and clean. Which is why Illustrator is the preferred option for most people who are doing graphic design and those sort of things, because down the road, if you need to scale it, shrink it, whatever you need to do, it's always going to keep that nice attribute and clean edges. So to put a long story short, you want to make sure that you're using vector images or finding some off the internet. And you can convert your own PNGs or JPEGs into an SVG as well. I'll put all the links to some of the free websites, paid websites, and ways you can transfer a JPEG or PNG in the description below. But there's a lot of great free options out there, and honestly, for landscape and what we're doing graphically, the free options are going to be absolutely everything you're going to need. But enough with that, let's take a look at how I created the first graphic. So head on over to Illustrator and create a new file in a format that you think is going to best represent what you want to show. For today's purposes, I'm going to be showing it in an 11 by 17 format, which is a really common format to use for these type of things. So for this drawing, I decided to create a design strategy that will consist of 4 main themes that will end up as these kind of wavelengths that intertwine to show that these things are connected. But by doing the wavelength separately, it gives you the option to single out each strategy and see what lives on each individual wavelength. So what I'm doing to start off is I'm using the pen tool and drawing 4 straight lines that are equally spaced apart, and then I'm going to duplicate it to add to the other side as our start and our finish line. Additionally, I've already went ahead and picked out a color palette that I plan on using here, and it's going to help create a theme and organize the entire diagram and drawing here. Additionally here, it's a good idea to kind of give this a good width and a good amount of space, as we're going to be dropping some vectors over and along the wavelengths as we go down the road. Once you have that all set, we're going to use the curvature tool, and while holding shift, we're going to click in some points randomly as we go across the page. Now make sure when you're doing this to make them really close together at the start and the finish. We're going to want to do this so that closer to the start and the end, that they keep kind of this nice straight or very low amount of curve to it. Then with the direct selection tool, we're going to click each wavelength and begin to stretch the anchors up and down to start making a wavelength. Make sure that when you're doing this, you're selecting the anchor, so that way it doesn't get all wonky on you and it gets very confusing if you're not selecting it from the point of origin, which is known as the anchor in Illustrator. So take your time on this and fine tune till you kind of find something that you like, and then you're going to have the first part of this diagram done. It's a good idea to make sure that they're weaving together and that there's not too many curves to it. It's very gentle, very broad, but still has enough space to kind of add your vector graphics in. Next, we're going to add some text that will correspond to each wavelength theme that we are using. For today, I'm going to be using nature, access, program, and play. Then from here comes the fun part. Now we can start to drop in some of those vectors that we picked out and start to place them along our wavelength. The idea here is that they don't necessarily need to be a one-to-one exact replica of what we're going for. They just need to kind of show a general idea and a general theme to what we're going for to help prove and provide information on the concept or the drawing down the road. So begin to fill this out however you like. Keep some good rhythm and spacing to it and play around with the sizing till you start to kind of find a format that you can repeat and like. Then we're going to repeat this process again with all of the other wavelengths. After doing a little bit more tweaking and rearranging, you're going to end up with something that looks more or less like this. And remember, keep in mind that it doesn't need to be visually cluttered. We're just trying to convey the idea and the principle behind the theme or the idea behind each concept or in this diagram. Now the last step is really where it starts to come together, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding some text to the bottom half of this graphic to start and tell a story of more of the specific things that are happening in your design. So write down some of your ideas that you're thinking of, or maybe you already have some ideas that you plan on using in your design. You want to write those down that kind of correlate to each category. Now to bring this graphic a little bit further together, I decided to give a nice skinny little rectangle that will be color oriented to where it is on the wavelength. And then when you're reading or looking through this graphic, you're going to understand this applies to that and this applies to this. So some ideas here are things like habitat restoration, play amenities, community goals, whatever it is that you think is going to show up in your drawing down the line or already will show up in your drawings, include them here. The diagram will end up being a really great preview for what's to come in your project, especially in a presentation. And it's also a really great graphic to fall back on when you're trying to explain things in the beginning or either in the end during critic phases. But essentially, this is what that diagram could look like, and it's just one of the many different routes you could go with this specific graphic. You could very easily mimic this type of graphic for something like a timeline or site history. It's really easy to do in that way as well. So now let's try this diagram in a completely different way that has something similar but is represented maybe in a different way with some different ideas. So for this one, I'm going to go with something that can explain the main ideas to your project instead of the main themes that will show up in your project. So this one is going to be kind of a revolving circle that revolves around these 4 idea infographics. And the circle is going to be kind of the origin or the creation of our design, but as they separate and leave the web, we're trying to say that they're separate in their own way, and these are these different entities in your design. So to start, we are creating a small circle with the ellipse tool, which is located where the rectangle tool is, or if you can't find it, just hit L on the keyboard and it will bring that up. To make sure that it's a perfect circle, just be holding Shift as you are creating your extents. Then we're going to offset this a few times. To do this, head on over to the object and then select Path, and then select Offset Path. Then with the amount selected, scroll on your mouse and you can see as you move it, the offset will decrease or increase. In our case, we're going to be doing this a few different times, and we're going to want to increase the amount of the offset by a little bit each time we do this. So that way at the end of this, we're going to have 4 visible rings. If you're not seeing any rings, then just make sure that your stroke is on, and in our case, it's going to be on white with a width of somewhere around 2 points. Once you have that all squared away, you're going to want to use the pen tool, and we're going to be making a line through the horizontal and the vertical of our object, so it will end up looking kind of like a bullseye. Then we're going to click and drag to select the entire object, and then head on over to the Shape Builder tool. This is going to be a really versatile tool in Illustrator. It kind of deserves its own video in its own right, but it essentially allows you to kind of separate ideas and shapes and also delete them as well. Now in our case, the reason why we drew those two lines overlapped through the entire circle is so that we could delete the top right edge here. So if you notice, as you hold Alt, your cursor will have a minus sign next to it. You can then click on it and then fill in the shape and it will delete it out. So once you have that done, you're going to end up with a 3/4 pie shape and you'll be ready to move on to the next step. Next, we're going to turn the smallest circle here back to white, and then we're going to use the pen tool and draw in some thin lines to designate different part of those idea arcs. Our first line is going to go to the end of the circle, and then we're going to follow up each additional line going to the smaller circle until we are finished. Next, we're going to add some small circle callouts that are going to have a corresponding color that will relate to our design idea in the infographic. Then we're going to create a guide for the arrays by offsetting our interior circle to where those points lie on that diagram. Then it gets a little bit tricky, but we're going to trace around that circle so we have the first part of the array. So like I said, we're going to repeat this process for all of the different callouts, and then we'll have a circle that is starting to look like this. Then we're going to make some larger circles on the right side of the page that will be the end line to that array on the left, and we'll connect it with some text. So under that main line that connects back to the array, we're going to type in a little bit of text to help guide what the infographic is and what it's about. And then additionally, in the arrays, we're going to add some text that support the sub-ideas to the main infographic or the main part of your design. So for the text in the arrays, we want to make sure that we're selecting all of our paths we drew first and copying and pasting them in place. Then we're going to select the Type in Path tool, which is part of the text toolbar, and then we can add in our supporting ideas. We can flip the text orientation by going to Type, Type on Path, click Type on Path Options, and then we can click Flip Icon. Lastly, all that's going to be left to do here is to bring in some vectors and make some little infographics that will tie back to your main ideas. Additionally here, if you wanted to, you could drop in some of your concepts that you've been working on or something along those lines that pertains to your design. But for me, I'm going to be going with kind of a collage style that will sort of represent or allude to some of my ideas. So I'm really just kind of playing around with the vectors that I have. I'm moving things around. I'm changing the scale and the size of things to try and give an idea to what the main thing about this infographic is that pertains back to the idea. So kind of as I'm going through and doing this, I'm thinking about, what are the key elements to each idea? And I'm trying to make them be the focus, or, maybe they have an abundance or they're larger so that they're shown as more important in that smaller infographic. So kind of play around with this. It's a little bit of trial and error, but once you kind of find a style that you like and are excited about, repeat this process and you'll end up looking like this. The last thing we need to do to complete this diagram is to just finish connecting the lines so that we have our final bridge between the infographics and the arrays. So like I said before, I think these two diagrams are really versatile. They can be used in a couple different ways, and I really like the way they came out. I could definitely see myself, if I was in school, as using these towards the beginning of a project for explaining some key ideas for a concept, or maybe some site analysis, or a timeline. I think they're really great options for that, and are a really nice kind of title slide image just to showcase what's to come in your drawings. But of course, there's lots of other interpretations to take from these designs too. So if any of you guys go through and try to make some of these diagrams and delve away from what we did today, be sure to share me that on Instagram. I'd love to see some of your guys' creations and share it out as well. But that's going to be it for today's video. So comment below which specific diagram
All right. I hope you all enjoyed that video. Really awesome resource there that will be in the lecture document once you receive it. But as you are thinking through your site analysis and design precedents, as well as final projects, incorporate in different diagrams to visualize what to expect on your site. is going to be a big component. As you all know, this isn't a studio class, but you are presenting visuals of your project concepts and your landscape intervention process as a prototype, right? And so with that being said, I'm super excited to introduce our guest speaker today. Glenn Dake is a leader in the design of landscape, transportation, and school improvements here in Southern California neighborhoods, where he has practiced since 1987. In 1996, he founded a practice to deliver professional landscape services to the building industry, institutions, and community groups. So again, I'm excited to have you here with us, Glenn. I've known Glenn I actually met Glenn, I want to say at LA Masa's event a few years ago, but we recently connected again at LA Masa's gathering event that just happened a few weeks ago. And Glenn was willingly open to coming and speak with you all. And because he is a practitioner in landscape architecture, I definitely thought it'd be a great opportunity again, as we have throughout the semester, get you all connected to folks who are doing this work so that you can hear their experience, as well as get an opportunity to ask any questions that come up for you. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Glenn.
Thanks, Ronnell. Is there anything that this group would like me to address to bring value to the time we're going to spend together?
Well, I'm not sure if this is a right question to ask, but what I would like to find out maybe is what is the most difficult part of your field that you've been experienced, and maybe you didn't like it very much, or maybe why not? Maybe there is the possibility that you hate it.
Cool. Okay, I'm going to make a note. Tough spots. Anything else?
And think about the insights you all need for your projects. We've been talking about stakeholder engagement. So any insight you can get from Glenn as a stakeholder, especially because he's been in the space, has the experience, this is definitely a great opportunity for that.
How do you go about, like, obtaining information, and data?
Obtaining information and data. I'll take a note of that.
Maybe in like maybe just like in connections between like a specific site you're working on towards like throughout the rest of the community, like how the site connects like with the rest of the community, how they benefit from it.
How the site connects to the rest of the community. Got it.
And maybe what is or are the main constraints in the area?
Okay, and constraints. I just want to point out that for we designers, we're standing at the front of the room, and that's a good thing and a bad thing. And so with our group here, the 10 of us, it's my objective to show you the respect that you deserve. I'm standing in the front of your room, and instead of just starting talking, I showed you the respect of asking you, what can I help you with? And I'd offer that if you're going to do work in the community, especially because all of the communities in LA have such diversity, it's good to just start out with modesty and to ask. So I'll go through. Communication is the key thing. It's our magic as landscape architects. It's where we bring value. But it's also it's a lot of work. It takes a lot of personal discipline to communicate in a way that you can establish rapport or trust with your audience. and to hear from them what you need to do your work, and to get the information in front of their eyes without triggering all their "this guy is giving me a sales job" feelings. Are you hearing me? When I'm speaking to a client group, the key task is to honor them. Just like, I'm a human, you're a human, let's treat each other respectfully. So with respect to what are the tough spots, what are the hardest things about practice, I think all of the extras, when I'm actually being a landscape architect or developing a concept or doing an irrigation plan, that's the easy part. The things that are hard are winning the job and creating a contract that's fair to me, and developing invoices and getting the invoices out on time and demanding they be paid and having insurance. All of the things that are around being a landscape architect are the hard things, because there are tons of them. There's so many things that need to be attended to. So I hope that offers a little sense of what I find to be the difficult parts of practice. Where do I obtain information and data about the work? It's a big deal. The first place is to request it from the clients. And a lot of time, part of the reason they're asking me to be there is they don't know too much about, they don't have any kind of like a topographic survey or a boundary survey, or things that they might not have, and that kind of stuff is expensive. So I've developed a lot of workarounds. I'm sure you guys visit Google Earth as often as possible. It's awesome, but it's not accurate. And I've got a surveying set up. It's not accurate like a real survey, but it's pretty good. And there's a lot of different kinds of information. In municipalities, you'll find a lot of record drawings on like Bureau of Engineering websites and stuff. That's an excellent place. If you can find the lot that is the property, the legal parcel that you're working on, it usually has actual dimensions for the property lines, and that'll give you something to scale your information, your like an air photo too. I hope that helps. There's a lot of different kinds of data. So like an important thing to give thought about is your direct client. Let's say it's a nonprofit, or it's a city, or it's a developer. That's your direct client. But there's a second client, or who are the users? And of course that changes over time. On opening day, your users might be one group, and as time goes by, the users will change. So I think you should be entirely thoughtful about who the users are. Are they a bunch of people who are, aging and old people, or are they people with a bunch of children and they have to supervise these children? Are they shoppers who've got 2 shopping bags, or are they kind of shoppers that have a shopping cart? That makes a big deal, a big difference. Thank you. Yes, the ZMIS site at the Bureau of Engineering is awesome. So that's what I can say about obtaining information and data. I hope that's responsive to the question. And then last, how can I describe the connections of the site and the community around it? This is a good question. There is always a stated, the client, your direct client, the person who's paying the bills, has an idea about what the design problem is. Oh, the problem is that we're going to make a childcare center, and it needs to be licensed. So the child care center playground needs to have a given square footage, and it needs to be easy for the child care provider to count the children at any time. There can't be any hiding places. That's their viewpoint about what the connection, what the problem is. But you, as the designer, of course, you have to do everything that they'd ask you to do. But you should also be mindful that the people who are bringing their children to this child care center, let's say, we want them to have a faith that it's a high quality child care center. And we want the children to actually have a good experience while they're at the child care center. So maybe your client just said the things that I had said, but they did not say, oh, it must be shaded. There must be plenty of shade. You know, that's your job. So there's that. And then even more difficult to discern, you might say, what's the role of this child care center in the community? Is it an awesome, really rare, important opportunity that some families will be able to send their kids to this child care center? Or is it the third child care center, and it's going to, be okay for people whose kids, only go there when they're really young children? Or, what's its role in the bigger community? So then, there'll be the questions of maybe, it's really physically difficult to access the site during the construction process, or there's not enough money to build the child care center. We're like building it with just 90% of the budget that it should have, and we need to find a way to make it sing with too little resource. So those are some real things. And, let's say the example that I've just offered, that you're being asked to produce a wonderful childcare experience with just too little money, maybe 90% of the money you would want. That's the magic that we bring. We're creative people. So of course we want 110% of the resource to build our stuff. But let's say we were to have an idea that, we'll use indoor outdoor carpet, or we'll use a special kind of reclaimed wood that's unusual, is wouldn't what you usually use, but it'll help you make the budget. The kids don't care. They're little kids, they just want to run and jump. To be the proponent of that kind of innovation, that's your job. So those are the things that I can say about the 3 questions that were asked.
Glenn, I had a question, and
Lay it on
first
me.
of all, thank you for being here. I wanted to ask, would you be able to describe a time when you had a dispute with a client and how you were able to resolve that?
I have a
If
client that
you had that.
no. I mean, I have a client that didn't pay.
Oh,
I didn't
okay.
resolve that.
Dang.
No, let's see. I mean, it happens. I sort of block that out. That's probably not a very productive way to deal with it. But it happens a lot. I know I've done some park work for the city of LA in North Hollywood, and they have the city of LA has it's a large group client. It's not one person. It's not like you work for the chief legislative or the city engineer. There's the city engineer is there, and the rec and park staff is there, and the council office is there, and these there's 4 other groups, water and power, and they all throw in the pot commenting on my work. and the comments they make sometimes conflict with one another. And there's a lot of different ways, when that happens to you, where your client is they're not doing a very good job of being a client. I think that if we went to our professional practice class, they would say, oh, it's very important for the client to be unitary, to not be schizophrenic, like the way I just described, to proceed in an orderly fashion. So I had that problem, and it could have really destroyed the project. And one of the things I did about it was I asked for extra money. I said to them, here is 4 different pieces of direction that conflict with one another. That's not something I agreed to work out for you. So here's a request for additional services in order to solve your insanity for you. I didn't expect to get them to accept that. My answer to what I did was I brought it to a head. I created conflict so that they would have to face the situation they were putting me in. Because the easier thing to do would have been to I'm going to make half of this answer. I'm going to answer this person's comment halfway and this other person's comment halfway and just hope for the best. So the jury's still out whether or not that was an effective way to deal with that.
Yeah. Well, it seemed to work out in that situation. That's an interesting way of handling it, and it worked towards your benefit. So that was successful. Um, Great. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'd always encourage you to have a light touch, but speak with meaning. I was very kind to them. I didn't make fun of them about their internal bad processes, but I had I hope I had a clear sense of where I was going. I didn't waffle, or I'm happy. I could be wrong. I certainly could be wrong. So.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
I can't emphasize enough the importance of communicating with effectiveness, because we have our aspirations are so enormous. We want to mend the city that's broken, and we want to foster diversity. And in order to do that, we really need to keep it simple and don't do any sales jobs. That video we just watched frustrated me a little bit, I gotta say, in that regard, because that graphic with the lines that are going like this, what did that mean to a normal person who's looking at that? If you showed that to my neighbor right next door, he'd look at it and be like, what does this mean? I think to be very direct fosters communication.
I guess I have another question as well, if I may, if we have time. So have you ever had to redraft a plan? Have you ever had to completely drop a plan and start over because a client was just not happy with that, or
So hard.
Yeah.
Of course. Of course that's happened. Yeah.
How did you have to deal with that? You just had to start from scratch, and
I mean, you're on a team with the client and they say, this is not really the kind of pizzazz I was hoping for. Could you try another direction? Just imagine hearing that. It hurts so much. You're like, this is my best idea, and you're saying it's sort of flaccid. And
Yeah,
like,
absolutely. It's
yeah,
like a
you gotta.
like
I'm
a
sure
slap
this
in
never
the
happened to any
face.
of you, but it's a terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially if you respect them. You know, I think that yes, that's definitely happened. And it's, I don't know that I have a good way of, I don't know if I know the a productive way of fixing it. But I think you just gotta, decide for yourself, am I willing to redo this? And for me, yes, I want to achieve. But you could also say, oh, this person's just being, playing king of the hill and trying to humiliate me. So I'm going to complain about their complaint. In the
Yeah.
end,
What
I had a boss who would say to the clients, this is years ago, he would say, will you fire me if I keep trying to convince you of this? Which I thought was an excellent way for him to make fun of himself. I'm going to keep trying to convince you to use these drought tolerant plants. And the person wants tropical garden. And I'm not going to stop trying to convince you to use the drought tolerant plants. So you got a way to say to them, I'm going to keep trying to convince you of this.
I'm gonna keep
Is
that
it
one
too
in my pocket,
irritating?
man. I'm gonna keep that one in my pocket.
Yeah. There is no magic. I mean, I've said just earlier, we have the magic, but the truth is, our magic is just the tools we bring to the party.
I've done some small scale residential uh design stuff in the past. And some of the best advice that I gotten from another designer was, when you go do your initial consultation and you go meet them for the first time, and then, maybe you draft like a small PowerPoint presentation and you give them all these plans and, you get to know them and you figure out, your initial plan based on like what they want and then what would work for their yard and trying to meet their needs of color, flower, whatever, etc. It's like one of the best advice that I gotten is like if the client is very difficult and you're starting to see that those like personalities are conflicting with you and you can tell from like very beginning that this is going to be a difficult path, it's like don't be afraid to just tell them like, hey, you know what, I actually don't have enough time, like I'm really busy right now, I'd love to work with you, and you just like shoot them down. And I've because of that, I've been able to like summon up the courage to like speak blatantly and be like, you know what, like this is probably not the best thing to like get into. And residential is a very like touchy subject, I think.
Yeah, I think that if it's not working, you can't pretend it's working.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think also the other thing I hear you expressing is you're not blaming them. You're just like, nah, it's not working. No harm, no foul. I still love you.
Hmm. Yeah, you try to keep a good relationship with people.
Yeah, I mean, this will in public work too. There'll be participants in the process who have a long history with each other before you ever came on the scene, and they might use your public meeting process to play out their drama with the council person or the crazy person down the street. And you can't, if that's sucking up all the time, I think you just have to let it play out. You can't control things. You need to be like a ship with a sail on the seas. You want to get to your destination, but you need to let the people do their bit. And if you're in a community where there's lots of crazy, that's how they do things. You just have to do your best.
Well,
Yeah,
hello,
I
my name is
I
Ronnell.
agree.
Um, I my question is, as one of my peers was saying already, that when personality or the first day that we meet when somebody, we immediately realize that the person maybe is not going to be a good client. Is it always okay to, or is it good, or is it important to have a strong decision to say, no, I can't, or whatever excuse we can come out with?
Well, that's an expensive word to say, right? Because if you're in the room, you've already done a lot to get in that room. So there's like the most ideal situation. There's some of our peers who only start to work with people that they know pretty well, or maybe they know a lot about them. That's awesome if you can become that person. But if you're just starting out, or you're going to enter a market that you've not been in, you're, say, competing for a public job and it's just a request for proposals, you're there. And it would be hard for me to walk away. But there is a time where you just sort of calculate, this person is going to be, my phone's going to be ringing and their voice is going to be at the end of the phone every day for a year, and I can't do that. Or what if it's the period of recession, when there's very little work
Yeah,
and you don't have anything else, and you're just like, I'm gonna take that. So there's no answer to that question, but I think it would help everybody if all of us were willing to walk. We knew that at some point there's a walk away, rather than just saying, yes, I'm going to keep beating my head against this wall forever and ever. You want to work, so. And I think the third thing I would say is, it's not all them. Maybe I am not as strong a designer as I think I am, or I don't communicate as well, or I'm late when I'm supposed to be I'm 10 minutes late all the time and makes them crazy, or whatever else it might be. You gotta try and have your feet on the ground in your dealings with other people. The project proponents have got a lot on the line, and also a lot of times they're in the game for 10 years. Let's say it's a developer and they've got control of this piece of land and they've got financing, and you say, oh, the developer's bad, but I'm like, this developer has spent 5 years trying to make this project real, and I just show up and decide that she's iffy and I don't like her. I've only been on the job for 3 months and I don't like her. She's been working on it for 5 years already. Who am I to show up? And so I don't think I do this as well as I talk, but I try to proceed with modesty with respect to the clients and the pressures that they're under.
wow. It's like dealing with one, if like having two kids and one of them is very rude and we have to deal with them because it's your own children, you can't get rid of them.
That's right. I think it's a good comparison.
Yeah, it's
And think
hard.
of your collaborators too. The civil engineer looks at the world an entirely different way than we do. So one thing I would suggest is, when we're doing design work, it really helps to show two options. You don't have to develop both options, but just to make clear to the people you're talking to that there's a second option out. Because it makes it, one of the complaints I think that a person would have about designers like us would be like, oh, Glenn's got his idea and he's just pursuing it, he's so close-minded. But if I show two options, like this one has got a lot of tall plants and this one has got mostly grasses, I think the grasses one is superior. It exposes the other participants in the discussion to a little bit of why we ended up where we ended up.
Linda, did you want to jump in there?
I was still thinking of a question I asked just because I kind of missed the introduction.
I just asked people what I could say, what topics I could address that would help.
They can be either about your final project insight that you would like to get in the spirit of our engagement with different stakeholders, or it can be in relation to just us sharing space with an awesome landscape architect, and any questions that come to mind with you in relation to that. And we can also go to Vivian or Ulysses or anyone else who hasn't had a chance to ask a question yet.
I have another question. What would you recommend us? Obviously, I'm a student at this point. I don't have experience. I'm just very curious, and I would love to find out what is to deal with clients and real life. I understand that school is one thing, but once I'm done outside, it's totally different. A lot of things that I don't understand and I don't know, and I have to learn. So what would you recommend us as a student, if you don't mind? And thank you very much for your answer.
I think it'd be great if you get in a practice that's got 5 or 20 people, and you can just see how the other people in the practice do it. That's how I learned. I tell that funny story about that fella saying, will you fire me if I keep trying to convince you of this? That kind of stuff, you can't learn that from a book. And it's tough to try and learn it on your own. So also, I think that the people that are most successful in dealing with clients, I think, are willing to do the hard work of learning about them, taking their viewpoint on things. It's tough to do that because they're different. Maybe they can't draw at all, or it would be wonderful if all our clients were charming and rich and businesslike, but that's not been my experience. So
yeah, but when a client responds like that, it's mostly because of money. Probably they didn't have enough of the budget that they expected to maybe spend. They didn't. That's not what we come out with. I don't know. I have some experience, and I've been in business in my life, and I have a very good experience, but also I have a bad experience. And those people who are difficult to deal with, normally I used to come out with some kind of ideas myself, what to say in order to change their mood, because when you are already in the middle of the job, you can't really turn around and leave, because no, you might get on trouble if you stop, if you drop, they might suit you. A lot of things that we had to think about it. So what I did before is just try to calm down myself, breathe, because I'm just ready, like I'm gonna grab you and I don't know what to do, at the moment, because that's, you feel so frustrated, but you don't show that. And that's what I did. I just calmed down myself and I found a way to solve the problem with my client. And once I'm done, when I'm done the project and they ask me, would you be able to do this? And immediately I said, I am too busy right now, so I won't be able to do that. Or what I did is just give my prepare a estimate very, very high. And they pay for, but good. But always is good for me was good to maybe give a price that is really, really high, because I know that maybe they're not going to afford it, and also they will also say, I will think about it, and then I call you. So that's when they say that, that's a good plus for me, because I know that I'm not very happy to work with them, and I just give up.
I think you offered 3 excellent strategies for dealing with it. But the most important one is at the beginning, don't work with people unless you've decided that they're good. Because it's like being married for a while. I mean, it's more than a year, most jobs. And if they're nice but not orderly, that's going to be your problem. So really make clear to them, like, yeah, maybe the fee is small, but my commitment is huge. If they're disorganized in their head about what the commitment that you're giving them is, if they are unrealistic, that's going to turn into a problem later. We need them to be good project managers, to not be crazy. Okay.
Awesome. Okay, awesome. I see Linda wrote in the chat, how do you go about working with large communities like Los Angeles while working with policy constraints you may have? What kind of conflict have you encountered while trying to meet their needs?
Yeah.
No worries, Linda. Multitasking in the library. It's amazing.
It's all good. It's all good. Yeah. The large, we call them a group client. I spoke about it a little bit. A client that's made up of, a couple people who have different roles in the project is a real challenge. And I would say, like, my firm is very small. There's just 4 of us. One way that firms work with a group client is if it is the design firm is like, say there are 20 people, there's a principal level person, and there's a project manager, and then there's a landscape architect. And that hierarchy inside the firm meshes with the client's hierarchy. So the day-to-day communication is with the landscape architect, and the project manager on the landscape architecture firm side is responsible for schedule and budget. So let's say things are working and then they stop working and we get behind, or there's a dispute as to the quality of the design. In that case, the principal level people can get talking, and then it can be resolved between those people, or the discussion can be had. And that's a very, very good way to do it. And it's an important reason that my firm does not get selected to work alone for the city of LA or other big cities, because I'm the landscape architect and the project manager and the principal. So it's sort of it's like this. What we have done is we join a team with a civil engineering firm. So the civil engineering firm is, probably 1,000 people who knows how many people they have. It could be any number. I have no idea. And they have principals and project managers and landscape art, line engineers. So the civil engineer takes on this role for us. And the other thing is to not neglect the contracting issues that we've been talking about. Even if the landscape architect is a small cog in, or is a small part of the big institution's objectives, if the work doesn't get done right, the people at the city of LA or whatever the big institution is, they're going to lose their jobs, or people are going to be mad. So just because we're small doesn't make anything less of our duties. So in a way, we sort of have to be responsible for ourselves. I hope that's responsive to your question.
All right, students, any last questions?
I hope I was able to be a little bit helpful.
More than a little bit, for sure, Glenn. This was an amazing, insightful session with you, for sure.
Thanks. Oh, good. Okay, policy constraints. All the time. So in residences, I don't do residences, so I don't have a lot of experience with that. Usually there's always the question in a residence of how much of the work requires a permit, because you can do a residential landscape if nobody notices, you don't need a permit. But if a neighbor is upset with your client, they might call the building department and make you get some kind of permit, because technically permits are required for anything that has a value over $500, I think, is the general rule. But it's not commonly done. So I think that's a policy constraint I would offer, is each city has its own rules, and you need to know what those are, because you're in trouble if you break those rules. And also the rules are not applied evenly. So I'm not the best person to ask that question of, but that's been my experience with it. So good, I'm glad. Well, hey, thanks for having me. I'm glad to meet every one of you.
Thanks again for joining us, Glenn. Again, I really appreciate your time with the students today. I learned a lot. I'm sure they've learned a lot, and I'm sure that they'll be incorporating a lot of what they learned into their final projects. So I'm excited about that.
All right. Do good work. I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good, Glenn.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon. How did y'all enjoy that?
That was a good experience.
Awesome.
Yeah, very insightful.
Yeah, y'all met some folks this semester, yeah? Or not, maybe not. Let me see. I want to go ahead and go here. So we're going to get back into this wonderful lecture. So yeah, today's lecture, Diagramming for Sustainability, Developing Precedents and Site Analysis. So we got a chance to hear from Glenn Dake and his approach to landscape architecture. In this course, we are developing, visuals and different ways to communicate what we're incorporating into our design interventions. So what does that look like? So there are different ways to diagram. Okay, so my computer's going really, really slow. But here we go. So this video talked about diagramming, right? So not everyone's a fan of it, right? But it is an option for you all to create a visual in relation to the concepts you're incorporating into your projects. And come on. My computer wants to act really slow right now, so forgive me for the tech difficulties. Let's see. How do you want to behave? See that? All right. We'll do that again. Okay, cool. All right. So programming diagram. So this isn't a landscape, but I did want to use some of the projects that I've done to facilitate this discussion, because when you're developing your projects for your final, you can incorporate some of these components into your project as well. So similar to the video described different elements to a site in relation to what it was doing. So what I did was follow the instruction from the video and created a diagram for the different features of a project that I did in the past. So transportation is a component in relation to this site, program, accessibility, and green space. So as you can see, I was able to follow the instructions of the wonderful speaker on that video. He has some really great videos. So if you ever wanted to get some insight on some concepts, we definitely watched a few videos in this course of his. But this right here shows how the site will feature information in relation to transportation, like metro access, active transportation resources, shuttle for ADA access, and electric vehicle ride shares. It also have programs inside the site that address affordable housing and supportive resources, wraparound social services, on-site grocery and retail, as well as recreational center. There's also going to be a component of green space, on-site recycling and composting, rooftop garden, drought-tolerant landscape, water capture and reuse system. And last, in relation to accessibility, there will be gender-inclusive restrooms, universal design concepts incorporated, culturally competent services, cultural relevant art and narratives, right? And so these components that are visualized in this diagram are featured in the site diagram program. So when you're developing a program for your site, you're identifying the features and the components that and how they will exist on the site and where they will exist on the site. So we've talked about socioeconomic, socio-environmental, as well as socio-political components. And so that's something that's really a part of the way that I approach policy and urban design. So this project also features that concept. Socioeconomic impacts caused by urban design reflects the lack of access to healthy food and fresh produce. Citation noted. Urban design practice has also impacted equity outcomes based on where people live in the city. Community co-op for local urban farmers to sell their locally grown produce on site will address food access needs. The site also offers affordable co-op retail spaces for local entrepreneurs and a co-working space. Active lifestyles are also important for the target demographic, which includes student, artists, single professionals, and environmentally conscious. Also, having convenient access to workout equipment ensures every resident has the opportunity to start and maintain their healthcare journey. The last 3 floors of the repurposed parking structure will include an outdoor pool, a workout room, and an outdoor entertainment center. So again, that's the socio-demographic component and really bringing access to housing as well as components of environmental consciousness, so socio-environmental. The last component of this program diagram shows where on the site that the city will be addressing the housing crisis. So many cities across the nation, including Los Angeles, participated in blockbusting and slum clearance to take advantage of property owners and renters. The result is segregated city. We got today. The 1100 Wilshire Project Initiative is an opportunity to address affordable housing crisis for the middle market while creating a living community representing the melting pot of diversity we celebrate in our region. So this right here is an example. This isn't, again, a landscape, but for example, different design concepts that you develop can be centered around these different visuals on what that can look like, whether that's identifying the different drought-tolerant species that will be located where your site area is indicating, for example, and how that then fits into the socioeconomic narrative of your site. Again, if there's going to be any recreation or fun or any green space components to your site, how does that fit into your site's narrative, and where will it exist on site, right? How does your program indicate that? And then also the socio-political, how does it represent it in there, and where that be represented on site, right? Again, this is an example of a diagram. There's 2 examples in that video. Feel free to use those as a reference, or use anything that you've learned in other classes to incorporate these components. Any questions at all before we move on in relation to developing a diagram visual?
Yes, I do. I do have a question. Where did you, or where I should find more videos about Illustrator? Because I tried to do that myself on the internet, but I feel that the videos are way too general, too broad. So it's kind of, I would like to get something more specific, like this one, for example.
Well, I can give you the playlist link for, our class lectures, and it has several of the videos that we've watched during our class lectures, as well as, it'll definitely get you in the algorithm, right, of different videos that may be relevant. But yeah, the folks that I featured in this class, I think, will be great resources. They're attached to all of the lectures, but again, I'll send out a link to the playlist for your reference before we leave today. Remind me to do that.
All right, thank you.
No problem. I think, was that Josh I seen? Yeah, Josh, go ahead.
Yeah. Just in terms of diagramming though, like is there any possibilities too that there could be like other things just like connecting to like the purpose of the site than just like limited to like those 4 components, or just like nature, program, accessibility, and transportation?
Yes, you can actually choose whatever you want to highlight. These are just examples that I highlighted from this project. But if you want to talk about air quality, if you want to talk about water, right? Whatever you want to talk about, whatever is most relevant to your site, based off of the considerations of socioeconomic, socio-political, socio-environmental, you can choose whatever components you want.
All right, cool. Thank you.
No problem. No problem. Any other questions? Awesome. Or maybe some questions that come up later. So when we're talking about design precedents, this is an example of one that I did for a project that was really addressing fire-prone landscapes and building residential homes there, right? And so the site we were developing a project for was in Malibu. So I identified a site precedent that was in a similar topography as Malibu. And so Santa Barbara was a great area that was similar. And the precedent I used was shipping container home, similar to the design that I wanted to reproduce on the site that we were looking at. Some of the components that I wanted to ensure we were being mindful of were the mountains, right? Similar to Malibu, Santa Barbara has the mountains and the slopes. And so I wanted to ensure that the design precedent was considerate of the type of terrain that was similar to the site. Another component was windows and natural lighting. really identifying how to maximize natural lighting and decrease electricity and spending in that regard. So these are the features of the precedent that were highlighted. Again, sustainability is always going to be a key concept that I introduce in my projects and design projects. So in shipping container homes, is really gets me excited. And so repurposing shipping containers as a precedent is something that comes up a lot in my designs. But again, sustainability was a feature that was brought up in the precedent and what was highlighted, right? So your precedents are going to be looking a little bit different than mine because you actually have a template for one. This was a struggle template that we had to do in my design course, and whew, let me tell you, I'm glad that you all have a template. This is another design precedent for a library project that I was developing. And this precedent really highlights community impact and resources, really bringing resources into a community. Again, site serving as ecosystem. Also, site reading, fragment, and temporal effects, really looking at ways that the site can enhance the experience of the regional climate. And so because it was next to the Pacific Ocean, having windows that allowed you to experience that, the inside-outside effect was a big component that I wanted to recreate on the site that I was developing. And then the double skin facade, right? This is like a really interesting design feature, which enhances airflow, natural airflow of a building. And so I decided to identify a precedent that communicated what that facade looked like in practice, because I wanted to incorporate it into my design. And it was a horrible idea to try to incorporate into my design, but that's a whole nother conversation. Very great concept, just a horrible experience from my design experience. So any questions in relation to precedents in regards to what should be included in your precedent? One thing I did want to mention, in your precedent, you definitely want to identify the architecture, who developed it, the builder, if it was already built, or it may be a draft or rendering. So, but if it's a build, definitely identify the builder. The client, if it was a client's project, what is the area, the square feet of the project, the location, and the year, right? So make sure you have those components as it relates to your precedent. Any questions? All right, so just to give clarity, what is a precedent? Precedents influence our designs, right? So they're a case study. They're the example of best practice in relation to the design intervention we plan to implement on the site we're operating on, right? And so with that said, I definitely wanted to get into different things that you can do to create your maps for your site analysis. So when I was in my design course, we learned how to do to find maps using USGS. Who's familiar with finding maps using USGS? Raise your hand. Thumbs up. Okay, so Josh is familiar with that. Anyone else? USGS?
Like
Okay.
like a little. Like I think I used it one time too to kind of like identify how like the land itself transitioned over time from like the 20th century to like our current century.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, USGS maps, I have a love-hate relationship with them. They're a pain in relation to computer memory. And also I have been working on a project that I have yet to like get resolved because my computer keeps crashing. My Adobe Illustrator keeps crashing every time I try to duplicate the USGS map. And it's like a pain in the buttocks, right? So this is another method that seems to work well. I've been able to use vector file or upload onto Adobe Illustrator. It allows you to resize it without an issue. It's still visually appealing and all of that. So I definitely want to share this resource with you all. Is anyone familiar with Snazzy Maps? Raise your hand if you're familiar with Snazzy Maps. All right, well, this is a great tool to reproduce your maps for your sites and figure out how you can incorporate them into your site analysis. So without further ado, let's get into this video. Okay, so it's already being shared. Boom. Press play.
Hello everyone, today we will learn that how you can create a custom map that you can use on your website or mobile application design. So for this purpose I have been using snazzymaps.com to create a map. Then we will bring the image to Adobe Illustrator to further editing the map, and then we will save the file, the vector file, and bring it to Adobe XD so that we can present the high quality resolution on our website. So how you can do this, go to snazzymaps.com and there is a tab, create a style. So let me click on it. So on clicking create a style, you have different options. Okay, so let me choose default and apply style. So we have a default Google Map style that you can see. So if you want this kind of a map, so first you have to decide that what kind of results you want so that we can go with the options to create something very similar. So if we want this kind of a result, let me go to the Snazzy Maps, and we have to make this gray area to white and the roads to a dark color, and we have to remove these labels and the labels on the road. Okay, so if let us remove the labels first. So there is point of interest. I'm clicking on it, and then all, and we have to turn off the visibility. Okay, so we have removed the markets and other important venues, the labels from the map. So now we have to remove the labels, the road labels. So there we have the road option. Let me go to all, and there we have to turn off the visibility. Okay, so we do not have to turn off the roads. We have to make the labels turned off. Okay. So when you will make a change to a specific field, there comes a dot. This will indicate that you have made a change in this specific field. So if I go to this geometry and I turn this off and I turned it on back, so there comes a dot. So if I want to remove this dot, I have to click on this refresh or restore button so that it can go to the default settings. So only one thing left, that we have distributory. We have to look that what actually this label is meant for. So let us go to the administration labels and turn it off. No. Okay, so actually you have to look at what this label is meant for and in which category it is, it will fall, so you have to turn it off. So now what we have to do is we have to make this gray color to white. So there is a section that is landscape, and we have to go to the geometry, fill, and there we have the custom color. So okay, so let us make it to a white color. Okay, so now we have to make the roads to a dark color. So there is a section road, go to geometry, custom color, and let us make it a dark color. Okay, so what is left actually, so we have to turn on the parks and we have to assign this park a green color. Let's find the, okay, there is a section park. Now we have to turn it on, go to all, make it on. Okay, so if you want to change the color, you can simply change the fill color of it. I'm clicking on fill, custom color. Let us make it a little green, a custom green. Okay, so there we have the map. Now we have to save this map. So I'm clicking on this download image. So Snazzy Maps will allow you to download 8 images a day. And for this purpose, you have to log in your account and then you can download 10 images a day. So I want 1000 by 1000 pixels. Okay, so this is the center. It is calculating 1000 by 1000 from this point, and we have to save the image with maximum resolution, the 3x. So I have to download the image. It will take some time, and we would be able to download the image. So then we will move this image to Adobe Illustrator, and then we will make some tweaks to it. We will add some labels and we can make other changes. And before making those changes, we have to convert this image to a vector file. And for that purpose, we will use the image trace option. So let me finish with this file. Okay. So there is a file. Let me bring this image to Adobe Illustrator. There we have the image. So if you have used the image trace option, you should be familiar that we have to try different options, and not every option will work for every single scenario, but some options will work for some scenarios. So we have to try. So in this specific scenario, we have to retain the green color and this black road color. So silhouette option will not work for it. Sketched art will not work for it. Black and white will not work. Shades of gray will not work. Yes, 3 colors can work. 6 colors, 16 colors, low fidelity, high fidelity. So these options can work for it. So let us go with 3 colors first, and let's see what are the results. Okay, so there we have the only thing that is creating some problem is the labels that we didn't remove. So these were the park labels. So if you do not want these labels, you have to remove them. You have to remove them from the style. Okay, so go to the park section. There we have the labels, and you have to turn off the labels. So then you will not get these labels on the map. So now what we can do is we can click on this and just click on the expand. Now we have to ungroup it, and now you can play with this map. You can create your own custom maps. So let us remove this section. You can remove this section, and for a very similar style that I have done here is what you have to do is you have to create a shape. So let me ungroup it. Let me copy this shape. Okay, let us move it to the other side. So if you want to play this on your map, you have to create a very own custom shape, and what you can do is you can just place it at the end of the road, assign it a similar color, and that's it. Okay, and for removing this road, what you can do is you can use different things. You can use this knife. Okay, so I just need to cut this road. So now you can remove this section from this section, or you can just use a pencil tool to modify a shape. So if I go from this point to this point, so what I can do is I have to do the same thing at this point. Okay, so this is how you can modify the shapes. You can use a pencil tool, or you can use a knife tool to modify the shapes, and then you can use this map on websites or on mobile applications. So how you can add the labels, just click on the text button, this text icon. So let us write here main boulevard. Okay, so let me change the typeface. So there we have the main boulevard. If you want to place this main boulevard, this label at this point, for example, so make it a little large so that everyone can understand. So actually you cannot add this kind of labels from the Sneezy maps. You have to add these labels by yourself. So let us make it bold. Okay, Poppins, extra bold. Let me create outlines of it, and then we have to go to object, path, offset path, and there we can decide that what color you want to give to these labels. Okay, so make it white. So this is how you can add the labels, and then you can move this to your website designs or to your mobile application design. So Snazzy Maps is very useful for getting the very accurate results, because at this point I have to represent the exact location of the hotel. So I cannot use a random map So I have to create a map so that users can understand that where this hotel is located. So I just labeled the important venues, the important locations near to this location so that people can easily understand. So if you are from Lahore, you are familiar that where is Main Boulevard Gulberg and where is the Liberty Market, so you can easily uh, uh, understand that where this hotel is located. So this is all for my side.
All right, all right. So I hope you all enjoyed that video. It definitely will be useful for you all as you think through incorporating maps into your project. Definitely use that video. It will be available after today's class. And I was able to make a map using it myself. I wanted to make sure it was comprehensive and it was useful for you all. So it is possible. It is possible. I really wanted to give you all a demonstration using Adobe Illustrator, but my computer is really acting up today. So forgive me for that, but I want to see if I could at least show y'all what the map looked like. Let's see. Scared to open up Adobe Illustrator. Let's see. Okay, so here. Supposed to be slow, and I don't know. I have no time for that. Okay, let's see. Nope. Brochure diagram. Yeah, this is. Yeah, not gonna happen. I thought it was gonna. Oh, it's InDesign. Cool. Okay, so I am going to share my screen. So this is what the map looks like here. And as you can see, it can be adjusted. Let's see. So bring this out of it. So I know you all have probably used maps and input maps into your projects, and they were all wonky. The image really was crappy, for lack of a better term. But with the snazzy maps, you're able to get a map that can be readjusted as needed. And as you can see, the quality is pretty good, and you have different scales of quality. So make sure that you're putting the quality at its highest potential. I think it's 1,000 by 1,000, and then 3 times the scalability. So another thing is you don't have to worry about doing too much to the map. You know, you may want to change the color on snazzy maps. You may want to take off the labels for the streets. If you do so, again, you definitely want to replace them using Adobe Illustrator or InDesign. I really wanted to show you all how to rearrange or change the shape of it. Is it going to let me do it? Yeah, it's not gonna work right now. Let me see the file. And also, what I would recommend is making any changes to your map on Adobe Illustrator and then converting that image, exporting it as a JPEG, and then entering it into your project. Let me see. I want to go here. 11 by 17 inches. By 17. This Adobe Illustrator gives me anxiety because it like crashes, and then I do have a project open with the USGS map, so that's being crappy, but I did want to show you all how to do this. So when you're placing an image into your Adobe Illustrator, let's see where are we at? My files. Let's cancel. You go to file and then you go to place, and let's see if this is going to cooperate with me. I have a lot of images to choose. Oh, shit. Try this again. Create. Okay. So I got all my images here. I want to get my map. I want to say it's this. Let's see. Nope. Place. Snazzy image. Let's go. All right. Okay, so now we got two images. Go ahead and place that one. And then we're going to put this one here. Okay, so if you get your map and you're like, okay, cool, but I want it to be a cool shape. You're going to go here. Find the cool shape that you want, a rounded rectangle that seems cool. And then you're gonna go ahead and cover it where you want the rectangle shape to exist. And then you're going to that cursor change, overcome the cursor. Go here. And then you're gonna go to clipping mask. So you wanna go to object, the object tab, and scroll down to clipping mask. And when you go to clipping mask, it should make your map the shape that you want it to be.
I'm not sure if this is just me, but I think that you're showing something and I don't see anything.
Are you not seeing Adobe Illustrator?
I do, but I think that you because it seems that you demonstrated something and
No, we're still seeing InDesign.
Can you see my screen now?
No.
It's really slow tonight. Let me see if I could close down. Let's see. You still can't see my screen?
I do now.
We see it.
I see Illustrator now.
Okay, so you see the map?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna go back a couple of steps and see if I could do that again. So let's just delete it. Ooh, I hate you today, computer. But I love you most days. It's just that you're not working right now and I need you to. Okay, so this is what the map looks like. Right? It's a square map. You can put it where you want it to be. But let's say you wanted to add a shape. That didn't move the way I wanted it to. Okay, so if you wanted to add a shape over your map so it could look cooler than just a square, you can add a shape. And so let's go to this one. This is a rounded rectangle. So let's give it some roundedness. And we're gonna go here and we're gonna put the shape over our map where we want the map to show the shapes style. So make sure your site is within the area. And then the shape will be over the map. Thought it was gonna turn black, but okay. What's going on? Does anyone else have these issues with the computer running slow when they're trying to do projects?
Just when I usually just have too much apps open or too many windows.
That could be the case. Okay, so boom, right? So you have the shape over your map. And so you're like, okay, cool, I got it where I want it to be. I want to go ahead and clip it, right? So you go to object in the tabs, and then you come down to clipping mask, and you're gonna click make. Oops, I forgot one step. So before you do that, you want to click the dark cursor and then grab everything, and then you go to object. And then you go to clipping mask, and then you click make. Boom, right? And so now your map is shaped the way that you want it to be shaped. And you can use it how you want to use it in your project, right? And so let's say you wanted to make this into two maps. So you can press, let's see, Alt, and then drag down. Boom. So now it's two maps, right? And so with this map, you wanted to focus closer in on the site, right? And so you could close this in. Oops, not like that. Nope. So let's click this one. Stop doing what I wanted to do. Let's exit out of here. It's not actually doing what I wanted to do. Okay, so this actually isn't doing what I wanted it to do. But what you can do is, if you're trying to describe, let's say, another component on the site, and you need two maps to do it. So you have a zoomed out map and then a more zoomed in map on your site. And so once you establish that, you can zero in on more relevant components of your site that are relevant to the area of the site that you're trying to address. So that's an example on how you can use multiple maps at different zoomed in and zoomed out viewpoints. And then also the shaping of it. You can use different shapes using Adobe Illustrator. If you want to, create circles, you can create a circle with it and use that clipping mask feature to create a circle, identifying the area of the map that you want to focus on. Right. So let's get back into the lecture. But before I do that, any questions on Snazzy Maps or Adobe Illustrator and incorporating maps into your projects? Awesome. And some of you all may be like some pros at the Adobe Illustrator and Suites. So always get those warnings that my disk drive is full and can't open my work. Yeah, you know what? I'm right there with you, Josh. And it's really frustrating because this is supposed to have like a million or billion gigabytes or whatever, which I thought was going to prevent it from ever going slow, but that was not the reality. But I digress. But yeah, any questions on using Snazzy Maps, incorporating maps into your projects? All right, so the reason why maps are important is because the landscapes that we are, interpreting or developing intervention for, they exist on maps, and different components in relation to the topography, different weather events are really easy to explore and communicate using maps, especially as it relates to your site analysis, when you're identifying what exists on site, what's absent on site, and what considerations you want to make on site. You definitely want to use maps to communicate that, and it's an effective tool. So this map on this site analysis identifies different site features that it wants to communicate. It talks about the different components of, again, sustainability, right? Repurposing shipping containers. It also identifies weather events like the Santa Ana winds. It identifies the different locations on the site that are impacted by these weather events. For example, it has a key that shows what the symbols indicate. So the Santa Ana winds are indicated by the blue arrows. The mudslide risk area is indicated by the brown squares. The green square represents the site build area, and the red circle indicates the wildfire zone. We have the sun path symbol, as well as the north arrow that shows the situation of the site, as well as the site view. All right, and so when we're talking about these different components, you definitely want to communicate these features on your site analysis. You want to have an understanding on where your north is. You want to have different components of weather events, right? And so this right here diagrams these different components, where they are and how they're relevant to the site. So when we're talking about landscaping, these type of diagrams really are important. As you can see, the site build area is in a fire zone. The red shows the different fires that have happened in the area. So there was another layer added to indicate the different fire layer that was impacted by previous fires. So again, you want to ensure that you have these components, different elements that you want to consider on the site, the key features that you want to communicate, have a key, as well as some directional symbols in relation to where, how is the site situated, where is north, as well as where's the direction of your site, how is it, you know, where's your front elevation versus your side elevations, etc. So this is facing east as indicated by the map in the site arrow, the site view arrow. And so that is relevant as it pertains to different features of the site. If you're trying to communicate hastities like the sunset or the sunrise, and your site view is implicating that, you really want to communicate those things. This right here shows a site that is centered in a more urban setting. And so these this map indicates elements like where the metro is located, bike share, recreational centers, pools, fresh produce, and different government resources. And so similar to the snazzy maps, all of the different symbols were removed and then replaced using different vector symbols that were then used to identify the features that were most relevant to the community. And so this is an example of asset mapping. So when we're thinking about the community in which your site exists in, what are different elements that exist within the community that are relevant to your site? Are there different bus stops that can get folks to and from your site? Are there different bike share locations that folks can use? Are there different, you know, park systems within the vicinity of your location? Are there any healthy food options within walking distance? Things of that nature. You want to communicate what those assets are. So now I want to kind of move into a project where there was some engagement with a client. This Pickford Market project was actually a design build project. So again, my expertise is more in architecture, but again, the framing I feel is still relevant to how you are using it in landscape architecture. So in relation to the layout, we talked about circulation, the flow of your site. That's no different from this design build project. We were really focused on the layout, making sure that folks can move around. There was also components of the layout in relation to being compliant with ADA. We wanted to make the aisles wider for it to be easier for folks with disabilities to maneuver, especially if they were in wheelchairs. The layout precedents to the left really indicate the ideal flow of traffic. Similar to the site, there were some other sections that were behind, really used for storage. But on the floor, there were several aisles that we were looking to maximize space for inventory, and again, account for different circulation and flow. Other things that were incorporated in this site were equipment. The store was really trying to enhance the equipment. There was a lot of old equipment there, rusted shelving, but there had been so much improvement in relation to the store's inventory. They had improved the types of products that they were selling. They improved the different healthy food options that they had. And they wanted to, again, get support with adding new equipment to support the different changes that they were going through. So we really prioritized their shelving as the equipment focus for their support, and we went with the gondola shelving. And this style really maximized inventory space in this site. The other component was the color scheme. The color scheme was really something that was centered in research. We definitely have to do research to identify what types of colors motivated certain feelings when folks were engaging in the store. So we had a curriculum that was used to inform how we made that decision. The proposed colors did brighten up the store's interior and sent a marketing message. So green promotes healthy, tranquility, power, nature, and is known to encourage consumers to purchase. We also want to incorporate like red brick, which was really about encouraging pleasant aesthetic to draw people in, while the beige color is a calming aesthetic, relaxing, right? And so this really just goes into the different considerations that were made for the decisions around the color of the site. So these are some site pictures, right? And so you can see that the site has some really narrow aisles. And so we wanted to change that. So these are a few before pictures. This is a concept of the floor, paint the floor, change it from that red and chipping paint, and do a two color toned wall. So gray at the bottom and then tan at the top of the wall. So this right here shows some of what it looked like when we were done. Definitely an opportunity to redo the floor. It definitely didn't come out as expected, but it was definitely better than before. We replaced the shelving, and we also replaced a lot of the signage decals. They had a lot of decals that were promoting alcohol, right? And so we replaced that more with signage or with healthy food options. Here shows some of the refrigeration that we replaced and how it was then able to better present the fresh produce that they had available for their consumers. These here are some examples of other projects. This is actually from our guest speaker. Glenn Dake, again, is a landscape architect. And so he has done some really great projects in South LA. This right here is a project that he did a concept development for along the Los Angeles River. Many of you have done similar project concepts that you turned in this semester, and I'm sure that many of your projects will look similar to this in their concept development as well. So I wanted to show you all some design concepts that our guest speaker Glenn developed in his career. So this is another cool sketch that he created, communicating the different space. This is 4 by 6 inches. Wanted to identify how much space they wanted for this walkway. And it looks like he developed some concepts of the different types of plants. Look like some succulents here. Again, some really cool concepts. So I wanted to really get you all thinking about how you all are developing your landscape concept versus like architecture. And we had an amazing guest who's a landscape architect who has done some great concept development specifically for landscape architecture. And this right here is the overlay of the map, right? Creating those borders around the map, identifying the different areas of interest, and then shading the different green space areas that will be a focus on the site. This right here looks like it's a whole community of North Long Beach, and then different green space opportunities that exist within the North District 9 of North Long Beach. This is another cool project. Looks like it's along a corridor next to a highway, but also looks like some type of parking lot. And so really great way to leverage in between spaces, right? So this is like a parking lot, it's connecting to communities in a way, and then also creating a walking path that communities can use for active lifestyle. Another cool concept drawing that really shows how open space can be used for play. It doesn't always mean that you have to develop some type of equipment. Sometimes you just need some really great plants, some succulents, or some California friendlies, or some California natives in an open, open landscape space that folks can use as they feel to use it, right? You don't always have to put, a park with a whole, system for, kids to play on the rocking horse, or monkey bars and things of that nature. You can create an aesthetic that is natural and folks can experience it in that way. So I really appreciated this sketch to indicate that. That slide is back. This right here, some site mapping that took place. Definitely don't think you all have to do anything this detailed, but this is a really great way to see how things can get to, especially like, let's say if we were to continue moving these projects forward, your projects will, you know, get to the concept build portion. You'll definitely have your precedent, you'll definitely have your site analysis, but you won't do any hard design. You're just really doing some really cool sketches, some really awesome concept development, and incorporating visuals using Adobe Illustrator and InDesign. Okay, so this is another cool landscape outcome from some really cool things that our guest speaker Glenn has done. Another cool project, living in the real world off of Santa Monica Boulevard. We went to LA Mission this past Friday, and they have an awesome rooftop garden concept, as well as a really cool area for folks to just relax in. And when I saw this image, it really reminded me of that rooftop area that we visited and got to explore. Right here, some really great examples of incorporating landscapes and hardscapes. Really beautiful gray green aesthetic. I oftentimes don't like hardscapes, but I do think that this gray green aesthetic definitely works, and that may be something that you're dealing with. There may already be concrete infestation, that may be an aesthetic that the client wants, but definitely want to green up as much as possible. And I think this project does that. This is a retention wall, and so definitely looks really relaxed, right? It's very natural looking, and it also looks very drought tolerant, and it incorporates rocks. And so again, sometimes your site may not be feasible or sustainable with different plants. So definitely looking at the different California natives that will do well there, and then incorporating other things to account for, like, let's say the retention wall. That may be a feature that you can adapt to the site, and then also using different things like rocks to instead of plants. This right here is another park design. This shows a lot of mulch, I would say that's being used instead of landscape grass or any type of plants or turf. So this is a really great way that they've incorporated different drought tolerant methods to address landscape development for parks and communities. So I did want to stop. We just went through a few examples of precedent. We looked at some different examples of design concepts, and I really thought it was important for us to go through this today because you all are going through your final project processes, and I think that this lecture will definitely give you some support with developing those concepts and some tools that you can use in that process as well. But any questions before we move on to developing methodologies and making recommendations? Okay, let me let me come to the screen because let's see. Any questions? No hands raised. Let's see. No hands raised. All right. Well, it sounds like everything's good so far. Let's go ahead and push through. Okay, in the chat, let me see. So far, so good. I hope that you can see what I'm doing now, Jesus. Thumbs up if you can. All right, everyone's good. Okay, cool. So moving on to ORE, so developing methodologies and making recommendations. So you have your final projects, right? And so you have your site analysis, you have your design precedents, and that's really supposed to help build context around what you're proposing for your client. Your paper, right, is really the written proposal of that. And this is an outline to really communicate what that should look like. This actually is an actual outline that I developed for the Office of Racial Equity. Again, the frameworks that I use can be interchangeably used through policy and urban design. And so this is an application in the policy process, but I think it's a great example for you all to see in relation to building out your project proposals for your written portion of your final. And so this shows like the methodology around how the Office of Racial Equity was developed. This was the action plan that I built over, I think it was about like a year that I built it. And then I had to write up the action plan and report so that it can be presented and passed by council. Definitely happy to report that it was passed as of November 1st. Really excited about that because it definitely represents like this best practice of achieving equity at scale government level within policy, right? And again, this is applicable to design. We've also been able to use a similar approach to support the Bureau of Engineering develop an equity grading tool for how they prioritize their engineering projects. So again, this equity approach that you all have learned over this semester has definitely been effective. And this is an example of how to build an outline to create a proposal that, you know, makes strong a case of your recommendations. So in relation to the Office of Racial Equity, we had some goals and intentions around conducting a landscape analysis. We talked a lot about that. We developed recommendations and formed a comprehensive strategic plan. We engaged stakeholders to catalyze buy-in. We developed an implementation framework and developed rollout for recommendations. And we wanted to support long-term implementation over a 5-year period. So the accountability partners and stakeholders, we talked a lot about that this semester for the Office of Racial Equity Action Plan. It included the Civil Human Rights and Equity Department, the Mayor's Office, City Council, the Chief Administrative Office, which is like the Budget Department, the Bureau of Contract Administration, which is under the Public Works, the City Attorney, which really makes sure that we're in compliance and alignment with any of the policy constraints. It also was in partnership with LA residents and the Community Racial Equity Advisory Committee, representative of community-based organizations. We connected with different LA City commissions, as well as the ITA team, which is like the technical assistance team. We also connected with multiple departments of the 44 departments, but one for sure needs to be mentioned, the Community Investments for Families Department. Other cities, we also did a thorough precedent research of offices of equity throughout the nation and built a relationship with departments of equity in California, because there are some regional considerations that we needed to be mindful of that other states didn't have to. For example, Prop 209, that has come up a few times in this class, and it definitely comes up in my work and always comes up in equity, right? And so that has been a big area of opportunity, and connecting with other cities who are dealing with some of those challenges has been helpful. What we were able to develop with this process was a mission and values statement, a SWOT analysis, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And we also created a personnel and budget proposal for this project. So how does this connect with your project? You all will have some deliverables, right, that you all are supposed to achieve with your final project. It should identify your site type, right? It should identify your considerations and constraints. And then it should also have a SWOT analysis. Your personnel and budget proposal is not going to be a personnel and budget proposal, but it's going to be your landscape intervention proposal. So what are those landscape interventions that you think will most address the weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of your site and highlight the strengths, right? So similar framing, different things, right? And so in this policy approach, we use the strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats framing to identify strengths which were addressing institutional policies and practices that create racial disparities. And so, you know, your strengths are probably going to be centered around what's the site doing well. Weaknesses in this context was building success of an equity office was correlated in proper staffing, resources, and reflective of the city's desire to achieve equity as an outcome, right? And so you'll have to decide what your weaknesses of your site are and spell that out in your projects. You also want to identify opportunities. There are opportunities in this conversation that we're having around this policy for cross-department collaboration. So this is like stakeholder engagement, making sure that folks are speaking across stakeholder issues as well as groups so that you can maximize investment and impact, right? The last thing was threats. So in this equity work, it's threatened by politically driven decision-making, which creates a threat for long-term sustainability of equity efforts, intentions, and outcomes when decisions that impact policy and urban design do not reflect the needs of impacted communities. Distrust between the residents and their city governments is cultivated, right? And so that was a big threat that we were really trying to be accountable to and mitigate with our Office of Racial Equity Action Plan. So the 5-year strategic plan, it accounts for these 5 areas. So similar to what we talked about at the beginning with your site diagram, what are the areas that you're focusing on in your intervention proposal, right? And so in this project, we were focusing on policy research and analysis, data tracking, monitoring, and evaluation, technical assistance and training, civic engagement, as well as the establishment of a community racial equity advisory committee, right? And so that was the policy window that was directed to us by council. And so we used that to develop our methodology on how we were going to respond to it, right? And so again, we talked about how we did that, but it was really centered in the community's vision. We identified the community's vision through research of community-led reports, right? And those community-led reports let us know that their priority areas were health and well-being, housing in the built environment, education, access, and attainment, economic opportunity, community wealth, legal systems, policing, justice, civic engagement, procurement, zoning, and academics, right? And so with us understanding the community's vision, we were able to develop an action plan that was aligned to the policy window, but reflective of the community's vision. And so it resulted in us creating a budget and personnel request. We prioritized staffing, project programs, software, digital inclusion, language access, and consulting dollars in our budget request. And then we have all of these positions that we identify that we'll need over the 5-year period to execute the vision of the community as well as the goals of a policy window. And so this tool then allowed us to make recommendations in relation to what projects programs should look like. So in your recommendations, you're talking about landscape interventions. You may say, you know, it needs more green space. It needs to capture water on site, right? This right here shows an example of some of the programs that we intend to complete in their pilot stage, as well as get full funding for full implementation in the future. So this explains some of those projects and programs. In addition to that, it's all about collaboration, collective impact, right? Personnel, citywide implicit bias training. We developed that in collaboration with them. We created, in collaboration with other city departments, a citywide racial equity definition that all departments will use. We're developing common language. We're also aligning data and indicator definitions. And we're also developing partnerships to develop equity tools and management systems, which is really important to, you know, address institutional inequity and make sure that it's a part of the infrastructure that achieves equity as an outcome through process, right? And so we're working to develop the BCA contract and procurement equity tool, the budget department's equity tool, as well as the Bureau of Engineering's capital improvement project grading system. So with that being said, I wanted to quickly show y'all, this is just the outline of it, and y'all don't have to write a 30-page paper, but I want y'all to see what this outline is speaking to. Let's see what happens. Okay. So that didn't really go to where I wanted it to. But yeah, so there's a paper that I will put in the chat. It's actually the Office of Racial Equity Action Plan and report back that was approved from council. Again, it's a 35-page document, but the outline I think is very similar to what I hope you all can leverage, is specifically as it pertains to framing it for your landscape design projects, framing it around the methodology that you use, the folks that you engage, the different site considerations that went into your recommendations. Then you make your recommendations, make a strong case for them, and then conclude it with a strong conclusion, right? So while I am grabbing that link, I want to go ahead and open it up for any questions. Definitely want to hear your thoughts in relation to today's lecture, how you think it's going to support the execution of your projects.
Like in terms of like how you shared like your example with the Pickford market, I mean it kind of does help me give like a little clarity with the similarities between landscape architects and like architects in general. Just to kind of get like the general layout of like the circulation, the flow, the layout, and especially like the movement too, to kind of like give a clear visual on like how these are arranged to kind of give like more space or like allow easy flow of traffic of people to kind of get through this instead of like being compacted, kind of like squishing through these aisles to kind of get by, especially if you're having like these especially if you have like a cart in front of you or something like that. But yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Josh. And that's very valid. I think one of the things I learned in my practice is that there are so much similarities and alignment through a lot of these spaces, and we operate in silos, and that only works to our disadvantage. And so the way that processes product as an approach for me works is that, you know, a lot of the frameworks that I introduce you all to can be adapted to any space you find yourself in. And so I definitely want you all to think about those 3 theories of change we've constantly learned and went over and adapted to our lessons: narrative strategy, which means lived experiences expertise; permaculture design principles, which allows you to not only hold yourself accountable to values, but see the values that the stakeholders are being held accountable to; and then collective impact. As many hands as possible will make the work light, and it also accounts for any blind spots that we may have ourselves, right? We help other folks see their blind spots, but we also have blind spots that collaboration helps us see. So thanks for sharing that. So I will be dropping this link in the chat, but this right here shows, right? It shows the framework of a government-scaled policy implementation using the narrative framework, collective impact framework, and permaculture design framework that I've introduced you all to this semester. Also, you all saw the projects that I introduced you all to that I've led really incorporate that. And we can see in all the projects that we look at, as well as the sites that we go to, we can see what's either present or missing based off of what we learned this semester. So this is an example again of a government document. It shows the background, right? It's going to quickly go over it. We're not going to look at the content. We're really focusing on the outline. So this goes into the background, right? So in your conversation, your background is really going to be in relation to the site. And I really love my computer tonight. It is doing all of the great things. Okay, cool. So once you go into the background, you then want to go into your methodology, right? And so After you explain your background, you want to go into your methodology, you did a research and a landscape analysis, you connected with these stakeholders or researched these stakeholders, and really describe the insight that you received, the biggest takeaways that you received, why you felt it was important. You definitely can incorporate any pictures, right? You definitely don't want it to be like picture heavy like many of your presentations, but if there are any diagrams that you want to add, any flow charts that you want to provide to communicate the concepts that you're introducing in your writing proposal, feel free to do so. This right here shows a list of the stakeholders that we engaged, right? And so it shows the internal stakeholders as well as external stakeholders. So that part is really important. It really gives folks an understanding of the amount of time that you spent, the folks that you engage. This right here shows the engagement and what went into that engagement. Like, what did that engagement inform, right? And so it breaks it down by the dates. You don't have to be this detailed, right? Within our class, you can just allude to the folks that we engage with, and through, you know, folks that visited our course, or either through the field trips that we went on. Those folks represent stakeholder groups. And then you can also have perceived stakeholders, right? Depending on where your site is located, you can perceive that the residents would be a stakeholder. You can perceive that, let's say it's in the county's versus the city's jurisdiction, that the city or the county would be a stakeholder, etc. So right here, this section talks about the internal stakeholder roles as well as the assessment. So this could be what you envision their role to be, as well as the insight that you receive for them. One of the things that I think is important with the work that I do is to always do surveys, collect data, collect data, collect data. Not only do you research data, but you collect data so that you can have new data in relation to your impact, right? And so we were able to do collective impact surveys with our internal stakeholders to get an understanding on like how they experience the process. You definitely don't have time to do that, but you can, you know, communicate different insights you receive from different stakeholder groups, as many as you can communicate in your project. This is just an example of what it could look like, right? It could look like data that you've collected. Definitely want to talk about the stakeholder groups, like within their stakeholder groups. So if you have one or two, I talked to you all about using the hero, villain, victim framing and identify, you know, your target demographic group, and as well as engage a perceived adversary, right? And so understanding what their vision and values are. And this right here just shows some of the vision and values of the different internal, the external stakeholder groups, the community-based organizations that we engage, the demographics that they serve, right? The communities in which they reside in. We also talked about the engagement we did with different cities, right? The engagement that we did with the cities gave us insight on strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So I was able to write about that. And then it goes into our proposal, right? So these are all the takeaways. And then it goes into the proposal. After, again, it goes into all of the details of precedent. This right here, this section is all precedent. What are all of the cities doing as best practices? Why is it important to us as the city? And which of those things are most relevant to what we are doing and how we're doing it? So now it goes into the action plan and framework for the city specifically. This would be similar to now you're making your proposal for your specific intervention on your site. So what does that look like? What are the key areas, right, that you're going to be making an intervention for? And then you want to give your diagrams about those areas, right? If there's some pictures that you want to add, but you want to write up how you're communicating the needs of the considerations, the constraints, as well as your target demographic, as well as being accountable to the other stakeholders. You do have your accountability to your target demographic, so you know who you're trying to get as an outcome benefactor, but you also have to be accountable to the other stakeholders who are also impacted, right? So that is really going to be conveyed through your proposal. The stakeholders should see themselves in your project. And that's a really unique thing if you can get many stakeholders who are different to see themselves in your project, right? So this section actually represents the intervention, the policy recommendations, and the interventions that will address equity for the city. you all will be making recommendations for a landscape intervention, okay? After you've done that, after you completed your recommendations, right, all of your considerations, the constraints, and your recommendations for your landscape intervention, you want to wrap it up, right, with why is this important? What is the city already doing that's aligned to what you are proposing? And how will this enhance it? What are the final recommendations? What are the fiscal impacts that you'll make? And then you're done, right? There may be some citations that you want to add, right? There may be some documents that you feel are relevant. Like, let's say if you reference the river revitalization project, right? You can add those documents or the citations to this document, your tool as well. So again, this will be made available to y'all. But I definitely want to stay back for any questions. We're really in the throes of the finals. So I did want to make sure that we spent time focusing on, you know, these projects and the examples, but you do have some discussion questions that will be due next week, and they are posted on Canvas. So definitely take a look at that between now and next week. But you don't have any assignments, right? Your assignments right now are your finals. You do have a reading on your syllabus, but the way that I'm dealing with that, y'all, is that I want to see that incorporated in your final projects as a citation. So definitely make sure you incorporate Saw City in any relevant way in your final projects. It should be at least one of the citations that you consider. That way it won't be an additional reading assignment. The questions are posted on Canvas, but they're also right here. So that is the end of the class for today. But again, make sure that you respond to those discussion questions on Canvas. And anyone who needs to stay behind, I know I want to say, Linda, you and I need to talk. And then Steve, I need you to stay behind so that we can talk about your midterm. And feel free to ask any questions, but you all are free to go.
I just have a quick question.
Yes.
Can you either today, tonight, or tomorrow, when you post the lecture in Canvas, can you also post the video so I can? Because I think I just saw the PDFs, but not the video. I mean, not the lecture.
Yeah, so I did try to fix the link issue. All of the videos should be posted on Canvas now. I you know, updated the links. Has anyone been able to access the links on Canvas? Thumbs
Is
up.
that for the
everybody?
videos?
Yes.
I haven't not tried. I know there's an assignment I'm missing, but I need to go back and watch that video, so I'll probably do that this week.
Yeah, if you could just check and confirm for me real quick, if anyone's able to check real quick.
What?
There should
Where is
be
that again?
videos posted for last week's class. There's the lecture as well as the field trip video.
Is it under modules, Professor?
It should be module 11, I believe. That's week 11. Week 11.
Oh, video lecture, video 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, they're on YouTube, right? Yeah, I can see the first one.
Okay.
Let me open a second.
Let me know
both
if you're
open.
having issues with that, Hermilo. Check it out. If you're having issues, feel free to reach out to me and we'll figure it out together.
All right, thank you very much. I'm checking right now. Thank you.
Cool deal.
Professor, I do have a question. Do we have any classwork due tonight? Is that the managing conflict, the collective
No,
impact?
just the discussion questions. I really want you all to focus on your final projects and any outstanding projects, right? And so because you're working in your group projects, the only thing you're really focusing on is your final projects and the discussion questions that come up during our lectures.
Okay, yeah, because I joined a bit late. I'm not sure